Welcome to Leaders in the Arena. My name is Jenny Whitener, and I'm the CEO of Bridge Innovate. For over 20 years, Bridge Innovate has partnered with leaders to solve problems while simultaneously building their leadership capabilities. This series is designed to share valuable insights and lessons from our clients and our network as inspiration for leaders in the arena. Just a little bit about Bridge Innovate. We are focused on empowering teams to lead, think, and problem solve differently. We offer a range of services from consulting services to future lab design sprints to learning programs for executives, and of course, a studio to think creatively. So we'd love to see you often at Bridge Innovate. Today, though, we're very excited about having some special guests with us talking about collaborative strategy, driving success with innovation. And today we are very, very thankful to have our clients and our guest, Barry White, President of Chattanooga Tourism, and Susan Harris, the Chief Operating Officer of Chattanooga Tourism, for today's program at Leaders in the Arena. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
It's our pleasure to have you. So maybe we could just start. I wanted to give you guys a chance to introduce yourselves a little bit more to our audience today. Barry, could we just start with you? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Help the audience get to know you.
Sure. Yeah. Barry White. I'm born in Northeast Tennessee, and I kind of ended up in this business. I love to travel ever since I was a kid, and I was in probably high school or first year at college, and I knew I kind of wanted to maybe look at this industry. I had no idea it was a business and really could make a career out of it until I went to New York City with my family. My father was involved in a national level association and checking out New York as a potential location for a 30,000 person convention. And we got off the plane, and there's a guy standing at the end of the after we got through security down there with my dad's name on it, and a limousine sitting out front to take us to a hotel. And there was a guy there that said, "Welcome to New York." And he had this Apple lapel pin on, and he gave us a lapel pin. And I was like, what does that guy do? That looks like something I want to do.
I love that.
And kind of learned, that's when I really learned there was an industry in organizations like ours around the country that really build, the economic vitality of communities through tourism. And so I ended up getting a job in Northeast Tennessee. I spent 27 years in Augusta, Georgia. A fantastic community and a major international event there. It was just a lot of fun to be working with over the years. I always wanted to come back to Tennessee, and when I saw Chattanooga open up about 7 or 8 years ago, threw my name in the hat and was lucky enough to end up here, and absolutely love it. What a great community, and being back home in Tennessee.
Well, great. And we are very thankful that you're here. And how inspiring, I think, especially for our younger audience members. They always say, the research says, if you follow your passion, you'll not only be happy in your work, but you'll be very, very successful. And so what a great story to talk about that early spark of passion for tourism that led you to where you are today. So welcome. Susan, tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
So I am a native Chattanoogan, and through some early career moves, landed in a human resources career and had the opportunity to work in several different industries before landing in tourism. I would say maybe my kind of connection is with the people of the organization. And so both through that HR opportunity and then being promoted into a leadership, just really recognizing how much time we as individuals spend at work, right? We spend more of our waking hours with the people at work than we do any other single place in the world in our lives. And so like the opportunity to really make a difference with people at work is kind of what fuels me. So I worked with one of our legacy attractions for just under 15 years. And then when I left there, I actually was on the Tourism Co's board and learned that Barry had an opportunity on his leadership team and had been really engaged by, again, what he was bringing to Chattanooga. And so it was a great opportunity for me to to reach out to him, and then joined the organization about 3 years ago.
Well, great. How exciting. And it's great to know that you're a Chattanooga native. Now I know why you love this area so much. It's part of who you are personally. So today, thanks so much for joining us and talking about strategic planning and the importance of having that be collaborative and highly innovative. So today, I just want to make sure that we spend the time letting you guys tell this amazing story that you've recently gone through. So I think we're going to just start at the beginning, right? So talk about Chattanooga Tourism's recent strategic planning approach. We were thrilled to have a chance to partner with you on this project. And what were your goals, and what did you enjoy about the process? Talk to me about that. I think, Susan, you were going to start us off.
Yeah, I think so. We had been doing strategic planning for, I will say, in this organization since Barry's arrival. He said 7 or 8 years ago. So that was kind of the first deep dive into that, and we may share a little more about that later. But really, our opportunity right now was to take a look at some changes in our operating framework. And so we have a foundation that had we'd recently been able to kind of separate and stand up on its own. We had some changes in dynamic with the way we worked with our partners from Hamilton County and the city of Chattanooga, and just several things that were kind of shifting in our operations that gave us really the reason to kind of sit down and do a little bit more than just update what was existing, but be willing to dive a little deeper. With that, we wanted to make sure we were doing a good competitive analysis with other destinations. I think sometimes people in tourism or outside of tourism don't understand that, in Chattanooga, we're competing against other cities. So Greenville and Asheville and Huntsville. And so having a good competitive analysis was an important part of the process. And then engaging our team in that work. Because one of the things that we knew going into our strategic planning was that we needed to make some changes to our organizational structure. And so being able to engage the team in the strategic planning process so that we then could do that important work of really organizational effectiveness, like doing the work of the business in a more efficient and effective way. Mm-hmm. So those were kind of the key drivers for us.
Right. And I remember in the early conversations that we had, one of the great things that about the two of you and bringing both your leadership perspectives together when we started the project is you were really clear on these things. You knew what the major changes were. You knew what your sort of competitive threats were. And you also said, and we've got to get this done by a certain date, right? So you were really motivated. I remember that. It's like, well, we will only entertain a proposal if you can get this done. I don't remember if it was June 15th or whatever the date was. But you were completely focused on those major priorities and a time frame. And so there was a lot of commitment from both of you to make that happen. One of the things that I found very exciting about your approach is how collaborative that you were. So oftentimes we see over and over again when we're doing strategy or business transformation, when we can get people engaged in the process, they tend to buy in. And then they get so excited about it, it's sort of the change begins to mobilize. So I was hoping that you could spend a little bit of time today as we think about how you launched the strategic planning effort, about the importance of collaboration and the stakeholders and how you engage them. So Barry, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that. So, we're a nonprofit organization, and we have a lot of stakeholders actually. So, and it's an interesting business model. Our primary customer does not live in Chattanooga because we're trying to attract people in to visit. But our community is at the forefront of everything we do, and the reason we exist. But we engaged, first of all, our staff. We have a board of directors, get them involved. Actually, have to inform them that we're setting out on this mission. We also have investors, and we have partners in the community. The core partners that we have in the tourism industry specifically include our attractions like Rock City, Ruby Falls. Retail is a big expenditure of visitors, food and beverage. People are eating, people are staying in lodging, hotels, and short-term rentals, and then transportation. So that's a pretty big audience here locally that we are working on behalf of and trying to get feedback and input from them, include them in the process in some form or fashion. Is going to provide and get that buy-in, as you mentioned, or we've talked about, is critical in the credibility of what we're going to produce as a strategic plan. So we did things like a SWOT analysis to our stakeholders, involved the board, involved the staff. Staff is involved from day one, really, and is obviously still involved and continues to be involved as we transition. But it's really about the community. And again, maybe unlike, I don't know, a regular for-profit business that has a very a hard product they're selling might be a little bit different, but we're more structured like a chamber of commerce, if you will. So really representing the community and on behalf of the community. So we wanted to do everything that we could to get that input and that feedback and participation in the planning process.
And one of the things I recall about when we went through that process together, that we were very intentional on those SWOT analysis and some of those insight sessions by stakeholder group. So that when we looked at the feedback from investors, or we looked at the feedback from the community at large, or we looked at them from your stakeholders or from your board, then we could you guys really seriously looked at what was synergistic. What were you hearing across these different communities and stakeholders? And then what was different? What were special needs? And those key insights, I felt like you continue to come back to as you progress the strategy, saying, okay, have we really honored the feedback from the board? Have we honored and responded to the feedback from investors or from the staff, right? So all these different communities, you're very intentional working with us, saying we want to design the input so we can see that. And then when we went through the process and what we call this iterative design, you kept coming back saying, okay, have we addressed this? Have we really listened? And I thought that was really, it wasn't just like a trademark on a slide, let's be collaborative.
Yeah.
You actually did it, right? And it was a lot of listening, thinking. When in our business, when we think about strategic planning, one of the things that we do at Bridge is we try to infuse design thinking, or what we call human-centered design, and some innovation tools into the process. And what that does is it allows us to listen closely for insights around what are people really looking for, what's most important to them throughout that research phase to help shape the strategy. And that also, we use some of the innovation process. If we find out what's important to people, then we actually do brainstorming, right? We brainstorm options for the strategy, not just deferring to the loudest voice in the room. So I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about what your experience was through that process, how we really engage with different stakeholders, looking at needs from them, and then how that was different than what you've done before.
Yeah, and I think really, I think that was one of the places from a staff engagement that really made a huge difference. And not just engagement in the process of the work to define the strategy, but also has been really important as we've worked in implementation and mobilization. I think, when people in organization, they hear about, oh, we're going to this meeting, we're going to learn about strategic plan. People come sometimes with their own ideas, their own priorities. They're going to make sure X, Y, Z gets said or taken care of. They kind of come holding that. But the process and the way that the research was available, the opportunity to engage, and the structure that the team at Bridge set up to kind of force the team members to get out of kind of that narrow focus that they came with and open up and look bigger, but then supporting them doing that and facilitating it and putting the framework around how to take all of what they brought with them, things they learned while they were there, listening to each other. I think just the framework made all of that just come together in a really neat way. I mentioned earlier about kind of the strategic planning process we had been through before, And for many years prior to Barry being here or I being on the staff, we had not really had a formal strategic plan. And so when he arrived, there was a process it was a very long, involved process, and it absolutely was all of the elements of a traditional strategic plan, but it also, in some respects, educated our stakeholders about what a destination organization is and does and how it connects in the community. And so this process was different in that that foundation had been set. And that foundation we'd been working within. And so we were really able to dive deeper in thinking about what are our partners thinking, what are the visitors thinking, what are the investors thinking, and giving the team shared language around those things. So I'm just a fan of kind of how that process worked. And the workshopping that we did around the design process was familiar to the final plan when it came out. So I think the team members could see their input in the final product. Some of the parts were different, but there was enough familiarity, there was enough connection to the work that we did that it really kind of speeded up their buy-in, made that process a little easier to understanding where we landed.
Right, right. Really fantastic. I mean, I remember, some of the complexities sometimes when you go through that intentional listening and creative process, giving people a chance to buy in and brainstorm and create possible strategic options, then you have to prioritize. And one of the things that Barry, you and Susan both continue to articulate to the group, we've got a mission and a purpose here, right? And then we've got to listen to these stakeholders, but we have to prioritize where we're going to have the greatest impact to deliver on the mission. And I remember even doing some prioritization 2x2 boxes and people putting their strategic options up there. And by them being able to weigh in and debate collectively as a leadership team, where will we have the greatest impact for the community for our mission, right? That you could just see them saying, well, maybe this goes in the maybe later stack, but this is the real priority. And I just felt like you guys putting all that mission and outcome front and center really helped the team work with you to prioritize that. That was really a way for leading by setting the parameters and stepping back and letting your teams really voice into the process. And I thought that was a huge win for you guys as leaders to set that stage. So once you got the strategy design, the next big thing was like, how do you make sure that you're ready for implementation? And a lot of leaders don't take this very important next step. Sometimes they'll go, we got the strategy done and it's on the hard drive. We've shown it to the board, we're done. But you guys really knew that it was important to go from beyond a strategy document and a set of initiatives to actually getting ready to mobilize. So talk about that in terms of how you got your team aligned and ready to launch the new strategy.
Yeah, so it was, we did some really creative work during the process, and I think getting to the point of having the plan complete in hindsight was the easier part than the implementation. We did look at some peer cities. I mean, this is a competitive industry like any, but we know that we're not going to get every visitor to Chattanooga every time. Right? People are going to go to other places and do things. So peer cities, we have a very a good relationship with a lot of people that we can look at and look at their org charts and things like that. But identifying the plan priorities, determining the staff and the skills and the talent that would be needed to accomplish the objectives outlined in the plan is kind of where we picked up and started with. We prepared multiple organizational charts by function, by need, skills, but with no names in them, right? What does it look like just from a functional standpoint that will get us from point A to point B, where we want to go? So that was a really interesting exercise. I don't know how many iterations of that there was, but there were quite a few over the time. And And then once we landed on that, we have an executive committee, we have a board of directors, as I mentioned. So it's getting buy-in from them, and then rolling it out uh, to staff and frequent communication, reminding everybody where we came, everybody that was involved in the process. That's where it really pays off, and rolling out a new organizational structure for us.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
we're still, I mean, and that was, I mean, we did this a few months ago, but this is still ongoing. I mean, change is hard for people. I mean, it's just easy. It's easy for me and for everybody as people just to gravitate back to what we know and where we're comfortable. And so it's repetitive. We're going over it. We're implementing some cross-functional teams and other things in order to really work this plan the way it needs to be worked. So ongoing, but very exciting, and we're headed in the right direction.
yeah, I thought that you guys did an amazing job. And I know, Susan, you may want to add some comments here, but first, just want to reflect, Barry, on just thankful, right, as a partner, that beyond just then articulating the vision and the strategy, that you went to that next step, which is often the very difficult, like you said, really dealing with that people alignment issue. Have you got the right skills and the right roles? Are the teams organized in the right way in order to really support and be effective with being successful at the strategy? And sometimes that is the hardest play, as you just articulated, takes the most buy-in, and it's a little bit painful. Change is hard, right? Change is hard for folks. But then hopefully as they've gotten new opportunities, they flourish. They see new ways that they can contribute and things that they can do. So congrats, right? So heavy lifting, it comes with great success, hopefully in the long term. So congrats on doing that. Susan, anything else you would add there?
Yeah, the only thing I think that we did in that phase that I think is really important, you alluded to the pretty crisp timeline that we had. And so we moved quickly, but we also had time as we worked on the structure for each of us. So our kind of internal team, Barry and myself, our HR leader, we also had time to sit with the changes we were making. And so we didn't rush through that really important process. So I think, we were willing to push hard to get where we needed, and then sit and reflect on it, and then come back to each other and really critique and make changes, so that when we got to what we rolled out, I think I would say I'm 100% confident that it's the right structure for our organization. I think Barry has that level of confidence. We're able to speak to that, to the board, to the team, because we were willing to do the work to get it there. And we appreciated our partnership with your team as well on making that happen.
Right. Well, I mean, well said in terms of the timing. I do think that's important to share with leaders who are considering this. You guys did have a very focused time frame. I want to say it was 3.5 months or something like that from start to finish. But you actually cleared your calendars, both of you, and even had some very big major obligations going on personally during that time. But you made the time on your calendars to make this a priority, so that when you had these very intense analysis decisions, you put the time in, right? So it didn't mean that you had to extend the project for a year. What you did was you prioritized the strategic work, so that you said, this takes focus right now. I'm going to dedicate a day to it. I'm going to dedicate a half a day to it. Or I'll come back to it tomorrow, whatever, and really made it happen. And I think leaders who just have the foresight, right, to say, we're going to go into this process, we need to make the time. We need to make the time. It doesn't mean that it has to go longer. It just means that there's some prioritization that happens. So, thinking back now over strategic planning, as we kind of come into our last few minutes together, if we have time, we'll take questions from our audience. But what kind of overall guidance do you have for leaders who are considering strategic planning? What kind of things should they consider? How do they get buy-in? What tips can you share today with other leaders who are considering strategic planning?
I'll kick it off a little bit. I think the main thing is you can't just create the plan and put it on the wall or on a shelf or in a file drawer. You've got to have that plan you've got to work that plan. And we drill down to it by individual. We have those KPIs. We know what we're doing, and everybody has performance objectives, personal performance objectives, and other things to kind of get us to the point where 2 to 3 years from now we can say we've accomplished, if not everything, 95% of what was in our strategic plan. So that's the key. Again, it doesn't stop when the plan's created. The other thing I'll just share real quick is, it's easy for us and to anybody to be in their comfort zone. And a few years ago, when we did a strategic plan, the first one, we did bring in some people who are in the industry, in the tourism industry, a lot of knowledge, and I think that was definitely needed at the time here. And just because of we got to see a lot about other organizations and how they operate. And as Susan said, we're letting people know how these organizations really work. But and I can tend to gravitate towards that comfort zone of having people in the industry. You may not know this yet, but I'll share it. It was a pretty big step for me, personally and professionally, just to say, okay, let's, we're looking at Bridge Innovate, and for us to make that decision to come outside of our comfort zone, and it was the best decision we made. So the leadership that was provided there, the execution and helping us along the way and taking those steps, learning about the business of tourism, as your team did, really ended up with a great product. So thank you.
That's very kind. One of the things that you just mentioned when you first were talking about your guidance, you talked about KPIs. And one of the things I just would compliment the two of you on is that when we were going through the strategic initiative, the defining of it, the goal setting of it, the key performance indicators, those KPIs, and then the tactics, I remember spending quite a bit of time on those KPIs. And I think that was great. That whole saying about what gets measured gets done. And I think, Barry, you were particularly zeroing in. You would go, no, wait a minute, is that the right KPI? And oftentimes leaders will just throw something out there. Well, here's an indicator. But you were very diligent to make sure that you were tracking the right things in order to get the right outcome, and not too many of them, right? So let's keep them short, crisp, on to the point. So thanks for the compliment, and thanks for being a great partner. Susan, anything that you would share in terms of strategic guidance to others who are thinking about strategic planning?
Yeah, I think just don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid to dig in and do the work, and to listen, to hear, to engage your team. And as Barry said, to partner with somebody who can help you get through that in a way where you get to good, usable work at the end. Because I think that's as we rolled out some changes in our organizational structure, and we've had communications even outside of the organization, the confidence in the process that we've done, the plan that we have, enables, whether it's me or Barry or other members of our team, to speak with confidence about what we're doing and the way we're moving. So you just can't be afraid of that as you go through the process.
Absolutely. And I think you guys did a great job of bringing all your best thinking and encouraging all your teams and all your stakeholders to bring their best thinking to the process. That's one of the things that we really value. When we do any kind of strategy project, we intentionally make it co-design. We believe that leaders know best their industry, they know best their profession, and hopefully we can bring expertise from working with other companies, with working with other arenas to help challenge your thinking. But you guys really stepped into that and led in a very extraordinary way. So thanks for being a great partner in strategic planning. We're thrilled that you're leading Chattanooga Tourism, and we wish you all the best.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks for being with us today. Take care.
Thank you, Jenny. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us today for our session, Collaborative Strategy, Driving Success with Innovation, with Susan Harris and Barry White of Chattanooga Tourism. We have more programs coming up on Bridge Innovate's Leaders in the Arena. coming up May 20th, a great conversation with Mark Mendenhall, Navigating Leadership and Ethics, and then with Carlene Blanding, who'll be talking about driving talent strategy through leadership development on May 22nd. Another great session on June 5th, Adaptive Leadership for Growth, with two very accomplished executives from Unum that we'll be having a chance to talk with. And then on June 17th, hearing about the Chattanooga Future Fund, Investing in Hope. I hope that you will join us on other Bridge Innovate events. You can check us out at bridgeinnovate.com/events, or reach out to us at hello@bridgeinnovate.com at any time. We'd love to talk with you. Thanks so much now. Bye-bye.